Here we are in Clash of Monarchs, third round in the summer, 1757. Things are looking very, very glum for the Austrians. Ferdinand actually took Prague, and Keith took Glatz, and the Austrians feel like they're in a lot of trouble here. Total victory point span, the Prussians are now up to positive 16, and the Austrians and the Coalition as a whole are at -9. I'm not quite sure how to counteract the might of Frederick's, of Frederick. Hopefully the Russians will be helping real soon, because Austria can't hold out alone and France isn't doing much, and I wouldn't count on the Imperial troops for much. So here, after 3 rounds in the summer, the cards are running low. Seems to be a perennial issue in this game. Okay, so I want to move this force over to join Cumberland. And that's allowed. Is there administrative action? The response the Austrians had was to send the Imperials over to Leipzig and siege that, and they didn't take it on the first shot. The French moved forward and went for Ubstadt, and they got that in one shot. And the British response was to generate some light troops. None of the Hanoverians had light troops with them, so that'll help them in terms of reaction ability, but they still can't move any of them. All right. So Frederick manages to test out the Kleiner Krieg rules and disrupts the supply for Charles. I'm not sure if they can get that back. They're in supply, so I think they can by just not doing anything. I'm just trying to see if things work usefully. But they also dropped 3 points on Bohemia and killed a couple of light Austrians in the box. So overall, it was probably an okay action. I just don't know if the main goal, they put like the majority of their points into that, and I don't know if that worked to any good effect. We'll see. The Austrians responded with some raiding of their own, upping that and getting a supply point, and successfully sieged Leipzig, but the Germans, as you can see, the Prussians put them out of supply. That's the Imperials actually, using a poor forage and fodder card. Which actually reduced their chances of taking the city, but it wasn't that hard. Now we're going to see what happens, because the plan that the Prussians had was to negate Charles. I don't think they really succeeded in that, and then march forward and hit deal with the Imperials back there, actually using Henry rather than Frederick. So they may still be able to get away with that. On to the French and English. And that's the end of 4. Speaking of the French and English, the French played another Colonial card. Again, just a +1, and they lost this time, knocking it back for the English. I kind of like how that track works, just as a way to eat up cards. The British responded with conjunct operations. French had to return 5 strength points from the map to his force pool. Well, that gravely weakened Richelieu's force. He's now actually not even a major force anymore. He's only 3 strength points. Henry's attack on the Imperials was not entirely effective. They each ended up losing 1 strength point. It was my first time on the measured battle chart. And, without Frederick there, I guess I was expecting this to be kind of impressive, but it wasn't. Even though I used a Prussian tactic to get pluses to the die rolls, the net was +3 for the Prussians, -1 for the Imperials, but the dice rolled were like a 2 versus a 6 or something. So it ended up not being that bad a defeat for the Imperials. They still hold Leipzig, but their force that's up there is out of supply due to the 1 card, and is probably going to have to withdraw. Well, indeed, the Imperials did a supply withdrawal, get themselves back in supply. They could have gone back another space, but you know, they're in a nice mountain space there and still threatening things kind of in an interesting location. The Austrians did some Kleiner Krieg upped the value of Silesia. Sorry about that. France tried to play their fleet to influence colonial events. The British negated that with their fleet. So nothing happened for either of them, actually. Didn't really think if I want to move anything else. I think I'll leave things as they are right now. Cumberland doesn't like doing anything. So we're moving into the autumn, and the game's changing in a big way. We're getting the Russians now. On this round, Apraxin died just before the Russians showed up, so they're going to have a different leader in charge now. But overall, I'm hoping the Russians can do something to convince Prussia that it can't beat Austria completely to the ground. Certainly if the Russians start doing too much damage, Prussia has to cope with them. But I don't know what they can do about East Prussia in particular. That's just... that's so far away. Even Frederick can't really handle that. But once they get through Poland, I think the Russians are going to present something that Frederick does have to deal with. So I'm going to capture a couple of moments here, just because I ran into another rule I was mistaken on. The Prussians played a light unit doctrine, which pulled a couple of units out of their force pool, or out off the map into the force pool, and changed the balance here. So now they're even in Germany as a whole, and in the border areas they actually have the advantage now. The Austrians played the Luden Rising card, which gets them a general who gives them some special abilities. I've at least seen one light war Kleiner Krieg card that was affected by him. So they want to get that out. He's also a good leader. They want to get him in play for that. But what I noticed was what these counters are for. I found an English card that referred, the Clive card, that referred to, hey, there's a limit to how many colonial ops you can do. And it turns out you can only do one per action phase, which is like season, summer, fall, and one per year if the country's exhausted. Well, I cheated on that last turn, but you know, what a shame. It didn't have much effect. It just ended up spending a lot of cards for France and Britain. I'll play by the rules from now on. I'll get back. I'm in the middle of trying to figure out what France is doing there. Playing the Army of the Main to get some additional troops on the board. So the Prussians, or the French, got those reinforcements on Venlo. It took a while to find Venlo. It's not identified on the card, and I don't know where it is. That's actually a location. Apparently there's been a map correction that I could put an overlay on the map or something, and it changes that. I would rather play it as Britain, even if that's a little less correct. It's just easier for me. Now, what I had to look up was what happens, because that's a larger force than Richelieu's commanding. What will happen is the French will have to activate that force, if possible, and move it back to Uppstadt to join Richelieu. I find it funny that Richelieu can't just run back and take command of it, but that seems to be the case there. Britain played the Luckner card, which brought the German area into an advantage for the Allies, for the alliance in terms of Kleiner Krieg. And finally, Russia. Russia finally went, and they grabbed some supplies, and then marched over to Königsberg, which is a key, and laid siege to it. Got a +1 on the roll. And that puts us, I already marked it, to the second turn of the fall. So here after the second fall turn, we had an event for severe weather. That kind of slowed things down for the turn. I'm not sure that can't happen again. It doesn't seem like there's any restriction against it, although you put a counter on the track. I don't know why that's needed. I used my new rule that I discovered. And both the English and French played colonial actions. We'll get to that in a moment. What did Prussia do? Good gods. Okay. Yeah. Prussia picked up an extra artillery piece. Just the bad weather made it so that they didn't really want to take actions. Austrians grabbed some more talers. The French. Yeah, colonial action, British did colonial action, both succeeded, so the shit's still in the same place. And then the Russians. The Russians did the coup for Danzig, which, with all the victory points the Prussians had, was pretty much a guaranteed thing. So now they can enter and use Danzig. And they can move their fleet there. However, it's an interesting factor. Other than the French and British fleet cards, I can't figure out how fleets do a damned thing in this game. And I've looked through the rules, I've looked at every single reference here in the index to fleets. I've scraped my memory and had this question while I was looking at the rules. As far as I can tell, there's no way to actually get the Russian fleet into the Baltic Sea. I looked at all the Russian event cards, none of them seem to do that. I looked to see if you can spend anything. See, the thing is, fleets can move for free, but they're sitting in the force pool. They don't leave the force pool for free. Now, these don't either. These don't send it out of the force pool either. And there doesn't seem to be a cost chart in the building. You don't get fleets out of this. You don't get fleets out of the rebuilding chart that I can see. And maybe I'm missing something. I'm sure I am. But I cannot figure out how you get your fleets on the board. So, I guess the naval aspect of the game just doesn't really exist. I'm going to look in the living rules, see if I can find something there, because this seems goofy as all hell. Okay, to start things off, I looked in the living rules. I searched every instance of fleet. There is not a single piece of evidence in the charts or in the rule book itself. I didn't look in the playbook of any possibility of the fleets showing up in the game, outside perhaps of some card. I have not seen a card yet that puts a fleet into play. I have not seen a rule that puts a fleet into play in any of the oceans, out of the force pool. I haven't seen anything that says you can move out of the force pool to an ocean. So, I think, especially since I believe, I haven't gone through those decks yet. So, as of right now, I don't think fleets can actually do some of the rules that are involved in them, but hey, maybe somebody will respond and let me know if they have something on that. Alright, what happened? Henry instituted his siege in Leipzig, and and didn't get anywhere, even though they spent supply to get two chances at it. Austrians upped their total number of light troops using the Croats card. That is the cool card that Luden would have helped, but they didn't have the numbers advantage, so they're building it up. It seemed better than anything else. The Froggies, what did they do? I don't know. I think they bought just a supply point and gathered their troops using the Minor Forces Administrative Movement. They have enough forces now, or they have enough on the board at least, that they could siege Vessel. However, turns out they don't have any cards that they can move there because Richelieu is so slow. The Brits, Cumberland, gathered up his army and marched over to Uppstadt, or whatever it is. Uppstadt. And didn't lay siege, didn't buy any supply points. And then the Russians continued their siege at Königsberg, and actually they fired Fermor. Remember, they lost to Praxen. They fired Fermor using St. Petersburg Intrigue and got a leader who's a little easier to activate out of Saltykov. They got lucky with that, but chances were that their army commander-in-chief would end up easier to activate. Saltykov is a very good leader. Fermor is not bad, except he's slow. So anyway, that's what we got there. We got two more rounds to go. I'm going to try to get this all on one tape. So for the Prussian action, Friedrich marched against Daun, and Daun pulled back. Friedrich attacked at the entrenchments. Daun held there. The battle was fought, and both sides took 4 losses, D3. Neither side lost completely. The Austrians played 2 combat shits. One of them the countercharge in the defensive position. They had a massive advantage on the die rolls, etc., but the net effect was about the same for both sides. Although the Prussians had to lose a step of field artillery as well. Now we got to go on with the siege, I guess. So one thing I hadn't managed to mention during that battle, we had another Kleiner Krieg raids before the Prussian turn, and basically everything got to raid, which meant a lot of points were distributed. We see some down in Bavaria, and we also got an increase in Bohemia. We got an increase in Silesia up to 19. The Austrians took their turn to do a Kleiner Krieg action, finish the devastation of Silesia. That will now cost Prussia. It cost them a point of monarchical will, and it's going to cost them a buck each turn until and unless that can be reversed somehow. I know of no way to do it, but there might be cards that allow it. Alright, so here we are at the end of the 57 turn. I've already moved it forward because some of the actions in the winter happen at this point. So what happened? Exciting things. Henry failed in his siege. The Austrian, Charles's army, was unable to withdraw. He was 3 movement points away, so he took heavy attrition. 20% was like 5 strength points. That's kind of problematic for him. Anything else exciting happen? I set the Halley's Comet marker to remind me to roll for it each turn from there on. The French failed to do their support action. They didn't manage to get an attack on the Prussians, even though they conquered a Hanoverian thing, and the responses were attack Hanover. Well, something in Westphalia. It wasn't actually Hanoverian. Anyway, the net effect that hurt the Austrians, as did the devastation in Bohemia. Well, we already accounted for that, but 2 keys, Prague and Dresden, have fallen. For the Prussians, they lost a point off of Königsberg, and that's really about it, I think, point-wise. The British haven't been funding the Prussians, but they haven't started to, so they don't have to. They may want to start to very soon because Prussians need money. On the other hand, the Brits don't exactly have oodles of cash over here either. But overall, the Prussian will is not very high at this point. And once it hits that 11 space, I believe they're fatigued. So that would be, or exhausted or whatever. So that would be a good thing to keep in mind. I am going to move on to the diplomacy step, and that's where I'm going to start my 58 turn from. So that's where we are right now.